Welcome to TechTable. I'm Lauren Hobbs, one of the founders of TechTable. Before we get started, I want to say a quick word about why we're here today, and then share a few thoughts about our first two speakers. We are in the midst of something that is changing rapidly. TechTable started as an idea between myself and three co-founders, Jackie Badson, Maureen Cushing, and Camilla Marcus, to address this rapid change. Having experienced different aspects of the hospitality and technology industries throughout our own careers, we saw an opportunity to provide a different kind of forum. A time and a place for operators, developers, and investors to discuss the current landscape and exchange ideas about where these industries go next. Whether by developing a product, funding a startup, or testing new ideas in your own business, everyone in this room is engaged in redefining how hospitality affects technology. You are the people who can drive this, and your response to TechTable has been overwhelming, so thank you for committing to spend the day with us. Additional special thanks goes to our partners at American Express, Alexandria Real Estate Equities, Union Square Hospitality Group, OpenTable, and Reliant. Thanks to their generous sponsorship, there has never been a better time for this conversation, nor has there ever been a better audience to do it with. Joining us to begin this conversation, we're excited to have Danny Meyer, founder and CEO of Union Square Hospitality Group, and Steve Case, co-founder of AOL and chairman and CEO of Revolution. 30 years ago, these two probably wouldn't have been considered a perfect pairing. But looking back, it's now clear that 1985 was a great vintage. That year, with little notice, two ideas were launched, Union Square Cafe and AOL. Worlds apart, but more alike than anyone realized at the time. With the founding of these two iconic businesses, each leader saw an opportunity to reinvent a centuries-old experience, dining and communication. What perhaps neither of them realized is that these seemingly different paths would steadily converge. Emails and the simple comfort of "you've got mail" would turn into the lifeblood of our everyday communications. And at Union Square Cafe and his many businesses since, Danny understood that a restaurant was more than dining out. It was a form of hospitality in the highest sense. Since then, both Danny and Steve have been leaders in high-touch, people-driven organizations. They understand what it means to bring people together. Both of these men clearly share a curious and entrepreneurial spirit. Our goal for TechTable is to look at things from a different perspective, and we're incredibly lucky to have two people here today who, in addition to their remarkable careers, have embodied a passion for constant reinvention that couldn't be more fitting to kick us off. Please join me in a warm welcome for Steve Case and Danny Meyer.
Well, thanks. Good job.
Well, thank you, Lauren, and thanks for the great idea, Lauren and Jackie and Maureen and Camilla. This is just a fantastic, just an amazing group of people who have chosen to be here, and thank you all for choosing to be part of the first ever TechTable. I'm going to take credit for being the guy that said, I don't think this is a very good idea. And I have to own up to that. But very, very quickly, these four women convinced me that there is so much misunderstanding between those who have solutions and those whose problems they're trying to solve. And I know that that sounds absolutely crazy, but the food world and the tech world are really the same thing in so many different ways. We're trying to bring people together, and we're trying to use different solutions to bring people together. In the table business, the hospitality business per se, we're trying to bring people together literally through the comfort and warmth and hug that food provides. And in the tech world, we're trying to bring solutions together to allow more people to be able to be more present, to give more hugs. And it seems like these are worlds apart, but they're really not, because at the end of the day, if you think about Steve Case's role in the history of the internet, it's really about community, and it's really about bringing people together. I remember the first time I ever heard of America Online, it was families who were finding ways to chat with one another, other than picking up the telephone and doing it. They were still dialing on a telephone and waiting about 10 hours for the connection to happen.
Hey, easy.
Okay. Now, I'm trying to go first because he's going to be pounding away at me. But before we get into our mutual love affair, okay?
Uh-oh.
I do want to go back. We're supposed to be.
That's going to be a difficult tweet to refute.
We're supposed to be talking about the current landscape, but I don't think we can do that without going back 30 years. As you just heard Lauren say, it was 30 years ago this October that Union Square Cafe started, and it was 30 years ago this past August
Yep.
that AOL started. And we both graduated the same year from a NESCAC school. We both graduated with political science degrees. He did a whole lot better, a whole lot quicker.
Oh, Danny's coming on strong, though.
Yeah. But I just want to tell you where we were 30 years ago. And I think Luddite would be actually a compliment for where we were 30 years ago. So 30 years ago when Union Square Cafe opened, our telephones had cords. Our reservation system was a book with a pencil, and if somebody had the reservation book in the basement and you got the phone call at the front desk and you couldn't find the reservation book, you could actually have somebody on hold for 20 minutes trying to find the reservation book. If somebody stole the reservation book, you could start your service and not know which end was up. As far as how we typed, we had IBM Selectric machines, we had Correcto tape for our menus, for our newsletters. We did get a fax machine, and when we got a fax, it would come out with thermal paper that would just roll on the floor. We did have one computer, and if you were lucky, you could line up the sprockets correctly to get the report for how your sales had been the night before. But that was it. That was it. We had no internet. We had no nothing. And as far as I was concerned, the meaning of tech was can you get the Romanco system to actually send the 3-digit code properly for the tuna to the kitchen? It was just absolutely crazy. That was 30 years ago. And then the next meaning of tech in our world was when we started to see that people were talking about our restaurants online, and they were talking about our restaurants primarily via blogs, and we had all of our dirty laundry out for everybody to see, because in the old days when we did something wrong, we would get a complaint letter or a complaint phone call, and it would be between us and the person that we had wronged and whoever else they chose to tell at a party on a Saturday night. But all of a sudden, what tech started to mean to us was that the entire world had a soapbox, and they could say bad things about you if they wanted to. And then something interesting happened, and our world started to see tech as an opportunity to provide more touch. I think reservation systems, I got involved very early on with OpenTable, helped us to spend more time in our dining rooms and less time scribbling down notes. It helped us to acquire data that we could use to apply more hospitality to our guests. But what I never predicted, and this is where I'm going to turn it over to Steve, is how the tech world would all of a sudden look at the hospitality world, the food world, and say, this, almost above all, is where we want to be. We see so many adjacencies, so many opportunities, and for Steve Case, who founded AOL in 1985, to have a company called Revolution that has so many investments that connect with the food world, whether it's Revolution Foods, whether it's Sweetgreen. You've had a delivery company as well. How is your world connecting? And I guess before we do that, where the hell were you 30 plus years ago?
Well, first of all, it's great to be here. I think it's great to be with, I'm not going as far as the love affair thing. I want to tamp down that rumor, but I do consider Danny a great friend. And when he invited me to participate here, I was delighted to be here. And I think the concept of TechTable is very important because it touches to this core issue that Danny's talking about, which is the worlds of technology and hospitality need to come together. Both sides can add a lot of value, but only if they understand each other, are talking to each other, engaging and collaborating with each other. And if they are stuck in their silos, the folks in the technology world, particularly in Silicon Valley, thinking they can solve all these problems without really understanding the problems, or people in the hospitality world not really understanding the world has changed and will continue to change, and how they can do business and how their customers are thinking about them has changed and will continue to change. And unless they change with it, they will be left behind. They need to both kind of get out of their silos and collaborate. So that's why things like TechTable are so important. In terms of the question starting 30 years ago, at the time we started AOL, only 3% of people were online. And those 3% were only online 1 hour a week. So when we said we wanted to get America online, we were serious about it. It was a drive to get America online, to popularize what we now think of as the internet. And it really took a decade. But part of, even though we were a tech company, we're an internet company, we were working with software and servers and services and so forth, at the heart of it, really for us, the soul of the medium was always people, and you referenced it. We call it community. Now people talk about social media or social networking. We always believed that while content was important, and commerce was important, and connectivity was important, the most important was community. And so we always were striving to figure out how to connect people. And over half of our traffic was always people. It was chat rooms like People Connection, it was instant messaging, it was forums. The people connecting with each other was fundamental to what we were building. And even I used to write like letters to our members each month reporting on what we're doing, almost like I was the mayor of the community or the maitre d'. We were trying to create the sense of possibility for this medium. We were trying to get people rallying as pioneers with us to build this medium, and the people were at the epicenter of it. So we never really thought of ourselves as a tech company, even though obviously we were. We thought of ourselves as a company on this mission to get the world online. And as I said, it took a while, but eventually it happened. The reason I think it's interesting now that these worlds are coming together is really two things. The first is I think there is now a recognition that food and hospitality is a big industry. That food alone globally is a $5 trillion industry. Number one. Number two, if you're a venture capitalist, you're looking at what's called total addressable market, what's called TAM. Food, it's 100%. We all eat. And we actually eat on average 3 times. In this country, I think it's more like 4 times, but that's another topic. So it is a big market. It's not going away. People are going to still be eating 50 years from now or 100 years from now. How exactly they eat, where they eat, and so forth will change. So it's a big market that is ripe for disruption. Technology can play a role. But there's also a recognition that understanding what's happening within that sector is critical. The other big theme, I would say, before I kick it back to you, is that what's happening in food and hospitality is the same thing that's happening in other sectors that have not been disrupted that much yet, but will soon. Education, healthcare, energy, financial services. There's a whole slew of big sectors of our economy that actually haven't changed that much in the past 30 years. The way kids learn today is about the same, a little bit different, about the same as 30 years ago. The way our healthcare is delivered is mostly the same. Again, there's been some changes around the edges. It will change dramatically in the next wave. And the way I think about it, going back to the original question, there's been 2 waves of the internet, and the 3rd wave is about to break. The first wave was companies like AOL, but there are many others, Cisco and Yahoo and others, that were basically building the foundation of the internet, the core infrastructure of the internet, evangelizing the idea of the internet, getting people connected to the internet. That was sort of 1985 to 2000 or so, and that was sort of the first wave, just getting people to understand it, getting people to want it, getting people to need it, getting people to use it. The second wave, really the last 15 years or so, has been building on top of the internet. Because the internet already existed, the whole focus was building products and services, mostly apps, the whole idea of the app economy, on top of the internet. And that's created some enormous successes, Twitter and Facebook, many other companies. And those opportunities will continue. But the third wave, because we built it and then we built on top of it, now I think is going to be integrating the internet and technology seamlessly and pervasively in every aspect of our lives. And that's going to, in the process, create enormous opportunity, but also enormous disruption in every one of these sectors I mentioned, including food and hospitality. And that's why there's a recognition that this is important, and that the dialogue that's happening, there's similar conference I'll attend that's not just the TechTable, but the tech school and the tech health, and even now the buzzwords in our industry are food tech, health tech, ed tech, fintech. They're basically these hybrid kind of definitions. These are now viewed as the next big opportunity. But the skill set required to be successful as an entrepreneur in the third wave is going to be different, I think, than the skill set in the second wave. The second wave was about small teams, it was about product, it was about engineering, it was about apps, it was about figuring out a way to get viral adoption, and so it was really people, product, platforms, things like that. Those will continue to be important, but in this next wave, there'll be 3 new Ps. One is going to be partnership. I think in the third wave, it will be hard to go it alone. You'll have to go together. Second will be policy. Every one of the sectors I mentioned are regulated. May not like it, but tough luck. They're regulated, they'll continue to be regulated. And understanding the government aspect of it is important. And third P is perseverance. Some of these challenges are actually hard. I don't think we're going to reinvent education overnight or health overnight. So I think understanding what's happened in the first wave and second wave is important. Understanding the game is changing, the puck is moving in a different direction, and the third wave is important. So I'm going to turn around and ask you a question, because you did join, which is really remarkable, the OpenTable board about 16 years ago, relatively early in terms of this connection between technology and food. And I remember we talked about this once, and you said the first time you went to a meeting, it was a little bit of a out-of-body experience, because you didn't quite understand what they're saying, and they certainly didn't understand what you were saying. And so explain what happened there, and what were some of the insights that you took from that, and what are some of the insights you think they were able to take from you that informed their thinking and their strategy, but also how did that inform your own strategy as you've then expanded?
It was absolutely like, it was my opportunity to go to business school, which I never did. And it was late 1999, early 2000 that I joined the board of OpenTable. And I'll never forget how it all came about. I had actually incorporated a business in 1996, which I never did anything with, called Maitre D Inc. And we had a regular guest at our restaurant who understood computers. We had another regular guest at our restaurant who was a big advertising guy. And I got the two of them together, and I said, let's form this company, because, and this was before I was even thinking about online reservations, real-time reservations online, but I was thinking about how could I possibly not have to work 6 days a week, but still empower all of our maitre d's at the restaurant to know everything I knew about how to connect dots between which guest was which guest. And what if we could just have an electronic reservation book? And literally, the thing that made me go there was that somebody had stolen our reservation book one day.
Wow.
It turns out to have been an old fraternity brother of mine.
Friends like that, who needs enemies?
Yeah. So, but fortunately, I never did anything with that. But then all of a sudden, in about 1998, which is when we opened 11 Madison Park in Tabla, there started to become some garage companies, and we worked with a guy named Zarko out of a garage in San Francisco, whose product was not online, but he did have an electronic reservation book. Then all of a sudden I heard about 5 different companies that were all coming at once. And I can't even tell you the names, but they all said, will you be an angel investor? Will you join our board? Will you adopt the thing? Our valuation is this. I didn't even know what they were talking about. But I happily picked the right one, which was OpenTable at the time. And I found it fascinating. And I also found it fascinating that there was an opportunity to throw out the reservation book and to have all this information in one place. So, joined the board, and everybody on the board was brilliant. Nobody on the board was in the restaurant business. And so you had venture capitalists, you had somebody from Amazon. I'm trying to think about what all the other, Adam Dell was on the board. Certainly he and his family knew a thing or two about computers. And I was hearing expressions and phrases that had never crossed my mind before in the restaurant business. But they were also hearing that this idea they had, I would say that at least 3/4 of the people involved didn't even really like to go out to eat. They just thought they had this solution for a problem, but they didn't fully appreciate how it felt to be on the receiving end of that solution. And I think that's kind of what this conference is about, is that you got to have both together. And so what was great was, while I was soaking up all this great learning, and of course I didn't think I was adding that much to it, I don't think that they could have probably done what they did without what I could add. But here was the biggest lesson I learned, and for me, I think one of the greatest things that the table industry has learned from the tech industry is a word called scale. Because if you go back 30 years ago again, the only way we could be taken seriously as a fine dining restaurant with Union Square Cafe was to have one restaurant. As a matter of fact, I was petrified, so petrified that it took 10 years to open a second one-of-a-kind restaurant, Gramercy Tavern, because I didn't want people to think that we had done something wrong by, watering down how much we cared about it. What the tech industry taught me more than anything was that scale is not a dirty word, and that being able to take an idea that's a good idea that makes people feel better than they otherwise would have felt and bring that idea to more people than you could possibly do face to face is actually a really empowering, wonderful thing for human beings. And I believe that it took the technology world to teach the restaurant world, especially the fine dining restaurant world, that scale is a good thing. And I think the technology world has actually empowered and powered the restaurant industry to grow.
So maybe, on a scale point, maybe, hypothetical I guess, but a Shake Shack, if you hadn't had some of that perspective on scaling, you might have said, did one, and I'll do some other concept, as opposed to saying, I actually take this thing and I'm going to, create dozens of them and kind of replicate a format. Do you think that's true, or?
I know that's true, but I'll take it 2 steps further. So, I don't think Shake Shack ever would have become Shake Shack if it had not been for the tech world, because when Shake Shack was born in 2004, and I'm sure my date's a little bit off, but it sure seems to me that was the exact year that the Flatiron District became dubbed Silicon Alley, and companies like Twitter were really starting to come of age right around 2004. There's absolutely no question in my mind that you would not have had 150 people waiting in line for an hour absent the opportunity to communicate with one another this way, so that they didn't feel like they were wasting their time, but they could actually use that time productively to tell the world what they were doing, to take pictures of what they were doing. And so I know that's the case. But I also think it's the case. Let me go back to OpenTable for a minute. OpenTable gave me, and I'm sure many fine dining restaurateurs, the opportunity to virtually be in more places than one at one time. So putting aside what I said about losing the reservation book, let me turn that into a positive. The fact that from my home, I could log on to my computer. This is before we had iPads. And I could check into the reservation book of every single one of our restaurants without having to be there. And I could type in notes to our maitre d' to give them instructions on how to take care of this guest or where that guest likes to sit or what that guest is allergic to. I couldn't have done that. I couldn't have done that otherwise. So
he became like the Wizard of Oz.
There's no question that tech.
Or Charlie of Charlie's Angels sitting back there.
Okay, I'm gonna turn another one on you. Is it true that you started off in the food world even before the tech world?
Well, a little bit. Dan's alluding to, I had a job in 1982 for a year as the director of new pizza development at Pizza Hut, which then was a division of PepsiCo. And the reason for that is I graduated from college in 1980. I, at the time, actually had this idea after reading a bunch of things that was now the internet. But in 1980, there were no companies to go to do that. There wasn't that much of a startup culture existing there. So even though I had this idea, I knew kind of what I wanted to be part of this digital revolution. I didn't know where to go. So I worked initially for a couple of years at Procter & Gamble in Cincinnati, and then took a job with Pizza Hut in Wichita. One was 2 years, one was 1 year. Then I moved to DC and joined the company, which promptly failed. But a couple of years later, two of the people I met there, we started AOL. So it finally worked out right. But it was sort of a circuitous path to get to where I wanted to get to. But I did actually learn something at Pizza Hut that I actually learned things at P&G and at Pizza Hut that informed on. P&G, they were kind of a corporate, kind of top-down, kind of command and control kind of operation. Changed a little bit, but that's how they were set up at the time. But they were really brilliant around consumer research, understanding consumer preferences, and particularly skilled at getting people to try their products. And they do that by giving out free samples of like a new shampoo. And the AOL free disc effort, which I'm sure you got more than one at some point in your life, probably was borrowed from some of that experience at P&G. At Pizza Hut, in this job, I actually traveled around the country and ate pizza. This is like, they paid me for this. This is like awesome. And we were looking, the insight we had was while we had test kitchens there and all these research and blah blah blah, that I bet the best ideas are not sitting in Wichita, Kansas. I bet the best ideas are sitting somewhere out in the country, probably in some one-off kind of mom and pop kind of restaurant. So what we were doing was travel around trying to understand what some of those things, and then if we saw a great idea, say, can we take this and put it in the Pizza Hut system? Finding the ideas was easy. Figuring out how to put them in the Pizza Hut system was really hard. And the reason for that, as you well know, is a great chef in a particular restaurant's one thing. Figuring out how to kind of simplify, almost dumb it down, so it can be done in 5,000 restaurants, which I think was what Pizza Hut had at the time, by chefs who are 16-year-olds who've been there for 2 weeks, is really hard. And so you had to figure out, simplify and figure out how to scale things in order to be, kind of successful. And the other thing I learned, which I think also helped inform our desire to keep things really simple with AOL, was, that most people like simplicity. They don't want an unlimited menu. Most people did order the cheese pizza or the pepperoni pizza or something that was kind of pre-packaged as opposed to try to figure out how to do it themselves. So there were some insights. I would say it was an accidental stepping stone because I just trying to learn some skills, make some money while I was looking for some opening to get into the, eventually get into the internet. But in retrospect, I can see how some of those lessons might have been appropriate. And then more recently, when we invested in companies like Sweetgreen, I know Nick is going to be speaking at a great company that we're really quite proud of. Some of the first meeting I had, it was like, wait a minute. I remember some of this stuff. I remember this like 30 years ago.
But there's a big difference in Sweetgreen and Pizza Hut.
Oh yeah,
we can agree with that. So you just made an observation, which I think is true, which is people like things simple. But I think what fast food taught the country was that and the world is that if you're going to scale food and you're going to do it simply, it has to be dumbed down. And I think what the fine casual world is teaching us is that Americans, and in fact people throughout the world, don't want it. They want it simple, but they don't
Right.
want it dumbed down.
And not too packaged.
And that you can, in fact, bring a chef-like approach to scale. And I want to ask you how you think the tech world is actually helping the fine casual world to continue to grow, and what might be different in terms of how we order food, how we pay for food, and how we experience food. And I'm really hoping that you don't talk about 3D printing of food. I hope it doesn't get there.
Or Soylent.
Or soy, oh my gosh. Yeah, let's just never eat. I'm going to inject it here and just get on with my day.
Let's say a couple things. First of all, I do think, and you're a pioneer in the sweet green, there's others, that the fast casual, just at a strategic level, the fast casual segment is eating away, if you will, at the fast food segment. And that trend will continue. Indeed, I think it will accelerate for exactly the reason you mentioned. And there's two twin underlying drivers there that are going to have a pretty profound impact. One is, and this is why we're so proud of Sweet Green, is a desire for healthier food. And that's part of what they're doing with kind of a farm-to-table concept, and Nick will be on, so I'll let him talk about that. The other is technology, and how does technology help provide greater convenience for customers without losing kind of the soul, the authenticity, the community experience, the feel of the place. And so, I expect for the companies like Sweet Green and others, that I wouldn't be surprised if 3, 4, or 5 years from now, half of the orders came on smartphones. Because if you know what you want, it is more convenient to order that way, and maybe you want to stand in line, but maybe you don't, and so it adds that little extra level of convenience. But I do not expect it to go so far. And again, there are concepts that are being tested. I remember, one I read about this week, where basically it's almost like a new version of the automat 50 years ago, where there's like no people and you gotta order your food. And I think that's probably too far. I mean, that's probably a segment where that's appealing, but it's how do you marry these worlds, exactly the nature of this concept, tech and table, so it leverages technology, provides greater consumer convenience and value, helps you run your business in a smarter way, allows you to put together kind of a supply chain with farms, in the region that you can actually create a network around. So how do you use technology to create a better consumer experience with better food in a better environment, a better atmosphere, as opposed to go so far down the path that you believe that technology is going to replace the need for people. I think that is extreme, and I don't think that's I don't think it's good for the nation, by the way. But I also don't think it's what most people want most of the time. And it will segment, and different people will try different things. And the great thing about entrepreneurship is we want to level the playing fields. Anybody who has an idea gets a shot at that idea, and some will work and some won't work, and some segments will surprise you. But my belief is that the marriage of tech and table, and striking that right balance, so you have the benefits of technology, but it's built on the legacy, the history, the emotion, the soul, the authenticity of hospitality, food, restaurants, and hundreds of years, thousands of years, I guess, of experience. That's going to be the magic. And if as I said at the very beginning, if you're just focused on one side of it and don't understand the other side, aren't really engaging on the side, you will be left behind. But if you get that, if you make those connections, you try to collaborate, you really try to understand what the other side is doing, and you try to figure out how to bring them together in the smart, balanced way, I think there are enormous opportunities to build great companies and also to better serve people.
Well, I could not agree more, and I think that it's a mistake to think that because technology can save you time, and because technology at its best can save you money, which everybody wants, to the degree that you think that technology is existent for the purpose of not having you be with people, that's a problem. And it's very easy to go down that rabbit hole, because every time you write an email, you're not having a conversation with somebody. And so it's easy to say, okay, well then the obvious extension of that is, let's never have any human interaction. I heard that you talked about a store design for Sweet Green, where you see a future potentially where there's no cashier, but that doesn't mean that you're eliminating the human transaction. As a matter of fact, you're basically saying, why should the human transaction, I'm putting words in your mouth, but why should the human transaction have to be, I give you money, you give me food? Why can't the human transaction be, you've already paid for it, let the human transaction be eye contact and a smile and the provision of hospitality?
And somebody real that you can see.
That's what I'm saying.
Making the food
so
for
using
you.
technology to enhance hospitality.
Yeah, and I don't know exactly. Nobody knows exactly how this plays out. The Sweet Green team is pushing on all kinds of different things, and some will work, some will not work. So exactly how it looks like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, it's hard to predict. But I do believe it's likely going to be striking this right balance, using technology in smart ways to enhance the experience people have with food, and also to make the business model work and be able to scale. But it's not going to go as far as something. And so it's going to be an interesting dance, and you're going to have to kind of try different things and experiment. One of the great lessons of innovation is experimentation. Most things do fail. You got to try, and even in baseball, like Babe Ruth was the home run king. He also was the strikeout king. He was swinging for the fences. And if you're swinging for the fences, sometimes you get a home run. Most of the time, you actually strike out. And that philosophy is critical for startups, critical for entrepreneurs, just trying different things. It's also critical for larger companies to figure out, because that's where they it breaks down. They don't understand how to create this environment of experimentation and risk-taking and trying different things, recognizing things aren't always going to work. So how do we create more of that sense of possibility and try more things, recognizing we'll be surprised, even the smartest people, some of the things that emerge when you actually let real people experience them are different than what you thought.
I'm going to finish with one last question for Steve. Are you surprised, in retrospect, you talked about the total addressable market of food being 100%. I don't think that anybody can argue that. But are you surprised to the degree that people use food as a way to communicate with other people? I don't know what percentage of Instagram photos have food in them, but certainly the people I follow, it seems like 90% are pictures of food.
Well, that might just be your world.
That
there,
could
Danny.
be my
You need
own
to
world.
expand your universe. It's not
I mean,
all
what
about
else is there to
food.
photograph?
Who do you follow
Let me
anyway?
take a picture of that light fixture up there. But seriously, when you think about chat rooms and blogs, and it just seems that people want to talk about food all the time. And yes, we are a self-selected crowd, but in retrospect, 30 years ago, did you see that coming?
Not as much on the food side. The big miss for me 30 years ago is I actually thought the idea of the internet was so obvious it would happen faster than it did. It really took us a decade before we got traction. It was a struggle, real struggle. We almost didn't make it. But finally it happened. So that's why the perseverance aspect I mentioned is so important. I actually thought it was going to happen faster. It actually took a longer time to really get going and then exploded, which is usually it happens in these things. They start slow. There's sort of this sense of possibility, some sense of disappointment. Things aren't quite coming together, and then it kind of hits a tipping point and accelerates. But on the last point on the food side, I think there's also another factor. It's not just about technology and smartphone. It is about a new generation, what some people call the millennial generation, that does care more about food. There is more of a foodie generation. They do understand the connection between food and what they put in their bodies and their health and their abilities to live happy, productive, and hopefully a long life. So there's a lot of drivers around that. That is why the fast food side is under so much pressure, and some of the concepts like Sweet Green and others are getting so much traction. I think that's only going to continue in the years ahead, and people are starting to recognize that there is a experience, a community that's built with that. Now, the point you made, I wrote an op-ed 3 months ago called "The Future of Food is Food," kind of taking on the Silicon Valley mindset of basically exactly what you were saying earlier. That if you can create a product that you can ingest without having to spend time eating, then you could be coding more. It's like, well, really? Is that what we've come to? I mean, if they're taking that product and selling it or offering it to the Syrian refugees, okay, I respect that. Indeed, I'd applaud that. But positioning it, we figure out a way to take food and take all the time and humanity out of food, so it's just about some nutrition and some calorie ingestion and some energy renewal. So it's almost like going to the gas station, pumping up so you can keep running. That's too extreme, and you know this, and everybody here I'm sure knows it too. That the experience around food, there is a social aspect, there is a personal aspect, there is a community aspect, there is a humanity aspect, and that's going to be the trick in this third wave, in this tech table. How do you take the right level of technology and partner it with that so it can get to another level and you don't lose the best of it? It's how do you take both sides and lift it to the next level? And that's why it's been great to be here and great to be with you. And I applaud the fact that TechTable even exists and that you're here talking with each other. And I would encourage you at like breakout sessions, not just to, if you're in the tech world, not just to talk to the tech people. The whole point is to cross-pollinate and go meet somebody you don't know and ask them a question you don't know the answer to, and that will collectively lead us to a better place.
Ladies and gentlemen, Steve
Thank
Case.
you all. Thank you, Danny.